Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode. I am Martine, and you are listening to Martine's Musings. Today, I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Sarah Poet, and she is a women's coach and couples coach, and she specializes in feminine and masculine energies and things of that nature. So, welcome, Sarah.
Hello, Martine. Hello, all of the listeners. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. So we were, chatting before I hit record, and I always feel like a connection with you, like some sort of soul tie. I'm not gonna lie, because when we had our introduction talk, you hipped me to human design.
Oh,
Remember that?
yeah, I do. I
And
was
and I
really excited about it.
and I found out my type.
What's your type?
Manifesting generator.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yes. So it at least it gives me some sort of framework to understand myself and what I because it like describes me to a T, like
Yes.
to a T so much.
Oh, I love that. I
Yes. So
love
thank
that.
you for that because I've been really going in the rabbit hole of videos about manifesting generators because I
Oh,
just want to
good.
learn more and find out strategies and how I can best utilize that part of me.
That's awesome. I think it's really wonderful for all of us, but for women, we've been kind of given a way to use our energy and our bodies, and a lot of the time it doesn't serve us. We're just constantly giving outward without
Yeah.
really knowing how we best work and how our body wants to use the energy that it has. And really that's why I love human design. And I just went a layer deeper with it, and I'm no expert with it.
Mhm.
Um, I rely on Karen Curry Parker and
Yep,
her
that's who I went to.
teachings.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then my friend Betsy Batista, I'll give her a shout out here. She has been trained by Karen and she's a reader. And so she's also my good friend. So lucky me, I get to ask her questions about it.
Yeah.
But I'm a human design projector, which means that like manifesting generators use their energy in a totally different way than
Yes.
projectors. And manifesting generators have that like the spleen and the sacral and can like move forward in um, like deciding to do something and driving forward. But as a projector, it's interesting because I have to wait for invitations to
Mm,
optimally use my energy. Now, that doesn't also mean like sitting around, because I think that's a misconception with a
right.
lot of projectors. And then we deal with a lot of bitterness of like, why doesn't anyone want me? Why can't I use all my gifts? That kind
Hmm.
of thing. And so our like kind of job is to stay in the things that excite us and wait until somebody kind of notices and invites. And so like me being excited about masculine feminine, and then you inviting me to your podcast
Yeah.
is me being a projector, you know?
Yes.
It's like it's working.
Yes, that is
Yes.
perfect, a perfect example, yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me a bit about your background, how you went from what you were doing before to now being a coach, a women's coach, and really specializing in, like, relationships and masculine and feminine energies.
Yeah, great question. And it's a long story, and I'll try to make it short.
Okay.
That I was a school principal. I had had a career in education, and I was good at it. Like for anyone thinking about changing careers or, taking that soulful leap, so to speak, it was hard for me because nothing was really wrong with education except that soul and spirit also has a way of telling us when it's time to leave a situation. And
Mhm.
so I had a couple of those throughout the last few years of my education career where it was like, well, this isn't working anymore and this isn't working anymore. And so um, I was driving, and probably in the last year and a half of my education career, I was given a school to start. I mean, I got to design the school. It was a great finale to that portion of my career.
Yeah.
But I was driving to and from work trying to find every podcast and every audible book that I could find on feminine masculine. And so it didn't quite make sense because, you know, as a woman, we might think like, well, I should be happy. Like I was making more money than ever. I had the recognition in my education career. I had a great resume, but I could tell that something else was calling me.
Right.
And I just remember, because I was a mom, single mom who went to work in education. And so the car ride was oftentimes like some of the only time that I had to myself. And I would, so I remember I was driving and I was looking out the window. I live in this gorgeous place in Western North Carolina with all these mountains. And I was just like gazing out the window. And I just put up this prayer that was like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I want to work in the field of feminine and masculine all the time. I had no idea what that meant. And then it was pretty soon after I said that I started to get the like, okay, well, here's the name of your business. Okay. Here's the opportunity to leave your job. Like if you want to go gracefully. And then I passed that up because I was afraid. I was afraid of leaving and afraid of leaving the paycheck. And so then it was a not so graceful exit because it was time for me to go. And so then, you know, other things happened. But so that's how I left my former career. And that was the, 2017, early 2018. And it's been so interesting that I was figuring out the online business and, figuring out online coaching and international coaching and things like that a couple of years before the pandemic. And so, yeah, just had a couple of years heads up so that I could be a little bit of a guide for people, and, we're really going through a really big time of planetary awakening, and feminine and masculine has so much to do with it. And I had no idea how big the calling was, like how big that nudge of learn about feminine masculine, know about it. It was my soul being like, come back to wholeness, So
why do you think it's so, I don't want to say that it's, like a buzz topic now, but there's a lot of information on the feminine energy and the masculine energy. People have their different takes on it. And why do you think that it's so popular now?
Beautiful question. Well, I think it is because of this planetary awakening. Because the feminine archetype, the feminine energetic, was really systematically, purposefully suppressed in a patriarchal culture. Like it wasn't given a place. But the interesting thing is that the patriarchy ran off of like free energy and free labor that they stole. Right? Like we know that, slavery, we know that. And so like that kind of thing just can't stand. That separation culture just cannot stand. But what patriarchy did was emphasized an unhealthy version of the masculine. So, everybody likes to kind of point to like white males and talk about toxic masculinity as very complex, but, the framework that we've been given, that itself was skewed and false. And so I really like to ask people to like question everything, right? Like, what do you think masculinity is? What do you associate? Like, I asked a couple weeks ago on social media, what do you associate with masculine leadership? And people, associate a lot of domination, a lot of control, a lot of like being told what to do, suppressing of thoughts, suppressing of truth. And that's really interesting because as women, we carry that kind of association with the masculine energy of like, this is going to dominate me. This is going to control me. I'm not going to have my freedom. I'm going to be taken from. These are very, very complex energetics. And so, right now we have this feminine reawakening that I think we've seen kind of for a couple decades now, like 1 or 2 decades of this like sacred feminine awakening and, women reclaiming the feminine. But that doesn't really address the woundedness that we have with masculinity.
Yes.
So, where my work is a little bit different is I'm really interested in reunification, like healing both archetypes and every person, regardless of gender identification, starting to ask ourselves, like, well, what does this mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I associate with this? And the other thing that I'll say about that quickly is, when we have these unhealed associations, like say, you are a female who had childhood trauma with your father.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real life example for me.
Yes, me too.
Okay. So then it's like that imprint of masculinity, that imprint of masculine or of man,
Mm-hmm.
right? Travels with us and it becomes how we see the world. It's like it becomes how we, relate to men. Like, do we have a defensive kind of demeanor around men? Do we want men to fix all of our problems? Are we afraid of men and keep them at arm's length at all costs?
Right.
Like these old associations that are linked to gender trauma, even though feminine and masculine are not gender, because we all have feminine and masculine in us, really how we relate to either is really ruling our lives.
It is.
It's like so ruling our lives.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I can totally resonate with that because, like I said, I can, I have like trauma issues with my dad. So then that manifests in different ways for women. Like I was always looking for approval.
Yeah.
From my partners, like always wanting not for them to be like, oh, I don't know. It was like because I didn't get that that approval or that, you're beautiful, you're special type thing from my dad.
Yeah.
I was always wanting that from my partners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you
Right.
throw in being an unaware empath
Yes.
with that.
Oh, yeah.
So it was tough, girl. It was messy.
Yeah.
For me
Right.
for a
Right.
while.
Because you're going to attract the masculine who wants to show up or the man that
The
wants to
narcissist.
show up
Yeah.
that then also is like feeding off the energy that
Mhm.
reinforces that, like, well, look, men are just going to take from me. Oh, look,
Yes.
men do, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, these loops, I'm really interested in breaking those trauma loops by looking at the archetypes.
Mhm.
Because,
That's valid. That's valid. There's something there.
it was such a huge awakening for me because I found myself in these repeated patterns in relationship. Now, I had been married to like my high school best friend, like
Mhm.
pretty codependent, pretty solid for a while. But then in my 30s, I divorced and I was in a series of like pretty soulmate relationships, like pretty significant for my own learning, right? But I
Yes.
noticed these patterns that kept repeating. And after the one, and it was so brutal. It was so brutal because I had really placed so much of, what I had always wanted from men and masculine, placed it onto him. He wanted to be that. And so it was like, I thought that was the definition of soul relationship or something like that.
Mhm.
Well, afterward, I couldn't believe that it had ended. And then I was looking at it and I'm always self-assessing. And I was like, what I wanted from my father, I wanted from him. But not only that, like what I wanted from an eternal masculine, I wanted from him. And so then I started to realize like, oh, women are really like, we are so hungry, thirsty, starved of the divine masculine that we look for it in men. And then we start looking around and we're like, are you my divine masculine? Are you my daddy? Are you my man? Are you my divine masculine? And every time I say that, women crack up, but I'm like, oh, we're doing that.
Yes, we are. That's why we're cracking up too, because it's like, oh, you just exposed us. I feel exposed.
Right. But it's really also empowering, because how long do we live like that? We live like that and invest so much energy into these relationships, and we are looking for the divine masculine. So this is why I love working with women to remember the masculine, because and it just takes one question, like it starts to open the door for women when we start to ask ourselves, well, what is my relationship with the divine masculine?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is my relationship with the divine or sacred masculine, or the archetype of the masculine? And then if you don't know, or you don't have it, or you're waiting for a man to show up and show you the sacred expression of all things masculine, it's like, no, sister, this is yours to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so empowering, because we can rewrite the template of the masculine. And I think when we as women start to rewrite that template of the masculine, we stop projecting it. We stop dealing with bullshit. We stop putting up with less than what we want.
Yeah.
And men just feel it. Like, we don't have to school men. We don't have to call them forward. We don't have to teach them how to be men. Like, that's all up to them. But energetically, when we know, I know what the sacred masculine is, because really I imagined it back into existence for myself.
Right.
I developed that relationship spiritually. And over time, I'm always working on it, obviously, and redefining it. And what does it mean? But every time I mistrust life, or every time I want a man to show me what security is, or a man to show me what, deep, safety and abiding is, then I'm like, wait a minute. Where am I with the eternal masculine?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is my trust in the eternal and in the divine first and foremost? And then if that's a yes, and if that's clean, and that's my heart is open to that, then really anything in the relationships with the men is going to work itself out, because I'm not putting whether or not I'm okay in their hands.
Right.
Yeah. It's big work, though. It's big and long work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's the biggest shortcut I have. So that's why I want to share that with you. Women asking ourselves that question is the biggest shortcut I have.
What I am interested in is how you would work with a man that has wounded feminine.
Yeah,
because
amazing.
They are out there.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so I talk about, let me give you a little bit of a conceptual framework, because I think it's helpful, and then I'll answer your question. So if you think feminine and masculine, and the most sacred, most conscious expression, that's an ideal, right? That's an archetype.
Okay.
Then for each one, we can have a hyper masculine, or a hypo, a deflated. So a super expression, or a relaxed expression.
Okay.
Kind of like a spectrum. Okay.
Yes.
And then on the feminine side, we can have a hyper expression of the feminine, or a wounded expression of the feminine, or a relaxed expression of the feminine. Mm-hmm. So an example for the masculine would be, sacred masculine in its beautiful glory would be, King Arthur archetype, takes care of the kingdom, makes sure everybody has food, listens to his woman, runs his kingdom with her wisdom in mind, runs his kingdom with heart. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a hyper expression of the masculine is actually going to cut off the feminine. And I talk about this in my TEDx. It's at sarahpoet.com if anybody wants to go listen to that.
Okay.
So the hyper expression of the masculine is what we saw in patriarchy. And so it's saying, I don't need to listen to the feminine. I'm driven by power. I'm driven by money and control. Anything in my way, I'm going to take down. I'm not in the best interest of community. I'm in the best interest of profit. Okay. So that's what the masculine looks like without any feminine. Then the suppressed version of the masculine is when you have a man who's really like afraid to be a man, and they're expressing a lot of feminine characteristics, or like they want to be mothered. They, have a really collapsed money template. Like they can't hold money, they can't hold a job, like that. Okay. So it's interesting because now I'm talking about men, right? But like whatever the masculine's relationship is with the feminine is actually going to determine like so much about how he expresses his masculinity. And a man who gets cut off from his mother, let's say, in childhood, he could react by closing down his heart and becoming dominant. Or he could react psychologically by just wanting to feed off of every single woman he ever experiences in his life. So he's like sucking the life force from women. Right? So maybe I'll pause and like let you ask your question again, because I kind of lost track of exactly what you asked to begin with. But what is his relationship with the feminine? Is that what you were saying?
The question was, how would you coach a man that has like wounded feminine energy?
Right on. Thank you. So it has to do with what his relationship was, probably with his mother.
Yes.
And he really needs to be willing to go there. And so I actually refer out, I work with couples and I'll work with men. And if a man really wants to work with me, I'll work with him. And I used to do that a lot. But I have a really good girlfriend. Her name is Nicola D'Alonzo. And I refer out to her for just men's work at this point, because that's all she does. And it's amazing. And so she's going to walk him through the archetypes. But there was this movement, like I think in the 1980s, called the mythopoetic men's movement. And there were 4 archetypes of the masculine that came out of that time period. And there's a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And I love to recommend this book to men and women and anybody, because we can always learn from the archetypes. And so that book, like a man can read that and be like, oh, that's me. Like he can see himself in these different expressions of these 4 archetypes. But what that movement was, getting at, and there's the Mankind Project and different men's groups that work with those 4 archetypes. And really what men are doing is like going around and reclaiming the healthy aspect of all 4 of those. And so, that's kind of how I look at it, is I would listen to him and then see where he is in those different archetypes and how he's relating to the feminine. So if a man wants the feminine to solve all of his problems and he's looking for a mama and he's, 35 or 55 or 75 years old, that's on him. And then I also would inevitably be having a conversation about his relationship to the divine feminine. Just like I was just talking about a woman's relationship to the divine masculine.
Right.
Because we've all kind of been cut off from this. Not even kind of, we have been.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, well, now a man really being in touch with his relationship to the divine feminine, very rare.
Yeah.
Like that's for the future, right? Like those are our future leaders, the men who are starting to get that. But I think it's really important that a man, realize, oh, I can go to that source feminine and get these eternal needs met, in a devotional relationship. And I think it's our responsibility, each and every one of us, to do that, with both archetypes.
Totally.
Because that's like sovereignty. That's, that's when we know ourselves and we're not trying to outsource our needs onto other people.
That's interesting. When you say outsourcing our needs, because I've never heard it put in that way before. It's very interesting. But what I also wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on the twin flame dynamic, because I know that you mentioned soulmates before. You know that you were in a few soulmate relationships, as I was, and I know I considered mine karmic. Um, the ones in the past that I don't even speak to them anymore. So
Right. They often burn up. Like those relationships often burn up.
I don't even know what they are. But what do you think about twin flames?
That's a big question.
Because
Thank you
not
for
everyone
asking.
believes in that.
Right. I never used the phrase twin flame.
Okay.
Personally, it never resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
So another long story short. So I was on this path to reunify feminine masculine. But at first I thought that path meant it's a path of union. And I knew that I would find or be with like a divine union partner. And it's interesting, in human design, I have all of these channels and gates about partnership, right? So it makes sense in multiple ways. But my understanding of union wasn't as, I guess, conscious then, or as evolved. And I got my ass kicked and humbled enough times that I had to learn from, each time it burnt up. So I think, we all come from a soul family, and we're all here to help each other ascend or move along that consciousness path.
Right.
And so after my divorce, it was like, okay, now Sarah's going to heal and she's going to figure stuff out. And it was rapid and it was a little brutal. So I met like 3 deep soulmates, actually more than that, but like 3, significant relationships over the course of 5 years. And there were others even before that were like primers, but I've never been with a man who wasn't a soulmate. Okay. Like I really want everybody to hear that.
Yes, I get that. Yeah.
They're all soul family. They've all got something else to like teach us and help us integrate. Now, maybe you stay with one of those men that wasn't my path or hasn't been yet. I think there will be a time where where I settle. I'm in a relationship right now, and it's like, it is settling, like it's by which I mean stabilizing. Like it doesn't have to be the rip it off like a Band-Aid, like really fast learning, because I was like, Spirit, I'm done with that.
Yeah. So
I did find this partner in 2018, and it came in a very obscure way, where the best way I can explain it is that he was like the closest thing to sharing a soul that I've ever like encountered. And it was the only thing that ever made me question, like, what is a twin flame?
Right. Yeah.
And so it was like he was my brother. Like everything about him was like we shared a soul. That's what it felt like. I don't necessarily love saying these words right now because I don't want people to think that that's what you have to find or that's what you have to quest for. So we found each other, and the circumstances were not ideal. And we went to shamans, we went to experts, we went to friends. We were like, what is actually happening here? Because this is really inconvenient the way this is working out. He was still leaving a marriage. I was like, and they were all like, the shamans were like, I cannot believe we found each other. Like they were like, wow, yeah, you really are who you think you are. Like, you're not mistaken. And so it, of course, like it was like a freight train that hit a wall. Like it was the biggest, hardest learning of my life in less than a year.
Wow.
And I went into a dark night of the soul after that. And I was like, what was that? I was like really questing for that answer. Like, how can you find that person and then it not work out? And so I did a really deep journey one day. And the answer was like, you're not mistaken. It really was like that close of a soul brother. And yet you're not supposed to be together in this lifetime. And that's okay too.
Yes.
And so that was, I was so devastated because I was like not even 40 yet. I was like 38 or something. And I was like, I wanted to give up. I was like, I did not quest and go through all this hard shit, to like find and lose my beloved.
Right.
Well, what I had to find was the eternal union. And so I think a lot of listeners, a lot of people on the planet right now are going to be on that path of inner union and eternal union.
Okay.
And so conceptually, again, I like to give these conceptual frameworks for these like big spiritual topics. So I look at my relationship to the masculine in 3 ways. 1, what is the masculine in me? 2, the masculine in a man, like in a partner. And 3, the masculine divine. And really, if I were to reorder those, the important 2 first are the masculine in me and my relationship with the masculine divine. And then, the human partner, the human beloved, they don't have to be your twin flame. They don't have to be the other half of your soul. They don't have to fill you up because you are whole. And so I think right now on the earth is a time of sovereignty. Like, I think that's what we're coming to, is sovereignty. Ultimately, that's what I'm teaching in my practice. I meet people wherever they are, but it's like we're on a path to this union happening inside of us, and this happening really with the divine or with God, like whatever you call it. And to me, God is Mother, Father, God. It's both, like both back in the same place, unified.
Agreed.
And so when we're questing for that, when we have a relationship with that, when these 2 are unified in our hearts, then we can find a partner who also has these 2 unified in their hearts, and we can be in conscious, sovereign relationship.
Yeah.
Like both people are responsible for their energy. You're not, I see a lot of, in like a twin flame relationship or consciousness, or people thinking they have to find their soulmate, really it's a lot of trauma projection, like I was talking about earlier, disguised as, oh, I want my twin flame. You want the person to like plug your holes a little bit.
I don't even think that everybody has a twin flame. That would mean that everyone incarnated, like their soul split. I don't think that happened to everyone. Every single person.
I really don't think we need to be like looking for those twin flames. That's my personal experience. I know I just told a big long story, but
no.
I guess that's to say, been there, done that, even maybe found it, didn't work out, and the union with the divine was the point of that.
Yeah, that was the whole point. Yeah,
that was the whole point. And I had to keep going, and I was like really asking myself, like, what the heck? Like, what? How did this happen? Why am I so unlucky? And it was like, well, it wasn't supposed to happen because my soul actually had more evolving to do. Right. So, quest for your own soul, don't quest for your twin flame.
Well, is that how you would kind of coach a client in like how, or one of the ways on how to reunify the feminine and masculine within themselves?
Yeah, I kind of like to see where they are on their path, and then I'm just working in the next phase of reunification, reintegration with them. For women, I'll say on my website there's this kind of map, I call it the pathway to reunification. And Spirit one day in 2020 was like, write down these 10 steps, and like these 10 steps of this big old journey. And the first day I sat down and it just like poured out of me onto the keyboard. And that day I got 9. And then I was like, which one did I miss? And then the second morning, as soon as I woke up, it was like, the download was coming in. And so I got all 10, and it's in this like beautiful ebook that someone put together for me. But that pathway is there, and it's written. I've never had, and I was like, who am I to say that this is the pathway? And it's a cultural framework. It's a collective framework. And it's been really helpful to a lot of women. I've never had a woman get mad at me for making that map, but I did have this like, who the heck am I to do this? And then, I think it's a little hard to explain, but I also channel and I see grid architecture. So I work in the unified field, okay, like where Mother, Father, God reign. And so in that space, a couple of things are happening. One, it's really important for us to reconnect with our soul architecture, like our oversoul in our architecture, our monadic architecture,
Yes.
so that we're sovereign, so that we are getting our information, clearing these old, false trauma templates and stuff like that. Where our energy was siphoned, where our energy was stolen, and really come back into this like sovereign energetic, the truth of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so usually always when we're in session, I'm going to be, we're talking, and yes, there's a conceptual like next step that I'm coaching. But when we open up that field and that space, there's always a next step of integration that wants to happen, in there. And really like the soul guides that, not, me in my little mind.
Right.
I'm just like the helper. Yeah.
Yes, I completely get it.
Yeah.
So I always ask my guests as like a final question, because I'm into self-care and the self-love mindset. What do you do as part of your self-care practice, or if any?
Oh my gosh, yeah,
I'm
all the
just
time.
assuming that you do, but
All the time. All right. Well, I'm going to give the framework that I give to clients. It's the sovereign framework. Okay. So we can do activities in 4 categories every day: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And instead of anybody else giving you like a daily routine or, a 30-day practice or whatever, I hold my clients to the invitation. Like I'm inviting my clients into what is your own next level in physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
Okay.
So my next level right now, like I'll just go through what I'm doing in each of those. So physical, I am in the woods all the time, depending on the cycle of the month. When I have when I have more energy and more yang energy, I might be running, but I have a 1-year-old dog. And so we go to the woods a lot. Okay. Emotional, I'm back into tapping right now, emotional freedom technique.
Yes.
Yeah, they're cool. It's effective. There were some things that were coming up in human design about leading with emotions. Like I'm supposed to lead with emotions. And I recognized that I needed to be more in touch with like naming my emotions, because I'm in this new relationship a couple months now. And I'm like, oh, I know how to feel my emotions, but I don't know how to name them really with someone really well. So that's kind of my emotion, that category, that practice right now is like, how am I feeling right now, really? And then mental, I'm actually doing a lot of future self quantum meditation. So like what you want to, like Joe Dispenza stuff, kind of thing.
Love him.
Yeah, like future self, bringing that in. And then spiritual, I do a lot of Kundalini yoga. So I wake up early in the morning and I love Kundalini yoga. I practice with Rama Yoga online out of LA. So that's, that is currently how I'm holding myself accountable to those 4 areas.
Right. That's
and
good.
Like next week it might change as my journey changes.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of my self-care in the physical is going out. I've been really into walking. And I used to be like a workout.
Yes.
Lots of cardio, spinning, weights, all of that. And I just got tired of it. It just got really boring.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And I'm like, I need to do something else. So then my husband was like, well, why don't you walk? And I'm like, I think I'm going to do that. And I just go outside after I drop the kids off from school, and I already have my workout gear on. and I just go walking around the park or around the lake for like an hour, and then I go
Yeah.
on with my day.
Do you listen to something while you're doing it, like for inspiration, or are you like clearing your mind?
I listen to music.
Yeah.
I listen to music. I could listen. I listen to maybe a podcast or a radio show if I don't want to hear anything like loud.
Yeah.
But I most of the time listen, to music. And plus, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm trying to like, you know, get my
Yeah.
heart rate up and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. You're just listening to your intuition and like doing
Hmm.
what's next for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the whole point, because I would literally force myself to work out
Yeah.
and do the strength training that I felt wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
didn't see any results until I started going outside
Yeah.
and walking.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't run because I have like bad knees. I have knee issues,
Yeah.
so I walk really fast.
Right. Right. I love that. But like you found the way to kind of answer the call, so to speak, but
Yeah.
also feel good.
Yes.
That's so important because
Yeah.
if we're fighting ourselves or forcing ourselves to change,
Hmm.
that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. And sometimes once in a blue, and I'll get on my bike too.
Yeah.
But when I want to, I don't feel like, oh, I got to do this spin
Yeah.
class for 30 minutes,
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can even look at that in terms of feminine, masculine,
Yes.
it's like there are certain times in a woman's body in the month where she's going to be more focused inward and more
Hmm.
yin. And then certain times of the month where like maybe there is a yang energy. And I really, being a school principal, I was like yang all the time, but I was also
Yeah.
younger. And now I'm 41 and I'm like, if I'm bleeding, I'm not pushing myself. Are you
Me
crazy?
too. Exactly. And
Like,
that's how I feel
no
too.
way.
Oh my God. And
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, and I tried to introduce the feminine and masculine energy thing to my husband, but he gets it, but
Hmm.
not all the way yet. So it's like, got to feed him bits and pieces. But as I'm getting older, I don't, I've always been a doer. I am a
Yeah.
Sagittarius,
Yeah.
and
Well, yeah.
I have a
I'm
lot of
like
Sagittarius in my chart.
manifesting generator and Sagittarius. Like you are a force of nature.
Yeah, basically. And I'm tired sometimes.
Yes. Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, as I gotten older, I'm like, I don't want to be doing all of these things
Yeah.
unnecessary. Like, don't ask me. You do what you need to do. Don't ask me my opinion. You just do it.
Yeah.
Because I realize that I take on a lot of things, and sometimes I don't want to.
Hmm. And I think that this is the mark of like a mature woman,
Yeah.
potentially. I don't know. I'm still,
Yeah, well, I'm
we're,
50,
we're
so
still,
it's about
yeah.
time.
Right. Yeah. This like, oh, hang on. My energy is so important.
Yes.
And I'm not, hustling. I'm not hustling for approval. I'm not hustling for money. I'm
Hmm.
not like, I'm not giving my energy in any way that it doesn't feel good. And that's a whole other thing. I work with women in that space like all the time. And I kind of live this experiment with my life. Like,
Hmm.
what does it look like to say, I myself, I'm not going to take on that dominating masculine archetype and push myself into the ground.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. And and we live in a culture that says, well, you have to hustle and work hard in order to make money, or you have to like work like that in order to
Yes.
make money. And so I've been really living this kind of experiment since I started my business of, what does it look like to do it differently? And like, what does it look like for women in business and female entrepreneurs? And, so like, it's interesting because what's happening in leadership trends, it is a feminine archetypal kind of,
Hmm.
coming back. So we
Hmm.
have, more collaboration, more shared decision making,
Yes.
more time for deep creativity. Like these are innovations, and even places like Google and stuff like that. It's the reemergence of the feminine, but
Hmm.
not called that,
Yeah.
but that's like what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where I'm at in my journey as well. So.
Yes.
This
Right.
conversation has been so great.
So
Thank
good
you
to be here with
so
you.
much. So,
Thank
where
you.
can people reach you if they wanted to connect with you for your services?
Wonderful. Everything's at sarahpoet.com. I do make a podcast for modern women,
Yes, you do.
waking up to the truth of who they are, called Sacred Remembering. Yeah, and I work with women, I work with couples of any gender,
Hmm.
and I work with organizations who want to do leadership differently. So,
Yeah, perfect.
mhm.
I did binge listen a few of your
Oh,
episodes.
great. Yeah, wonderful.
And I loved it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your wisdom with me and my listeners. I really appreciate it, Sarah.
So good to meet you and so good to be here. Thank you, Martine.
You're very welcome. And everyone, I will have Sarah's information in the episode description box if you want to make contact with her. Everything will be down there. And again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care. Bye.